So, I mean, let's do a little experiment. We have some adults, we have some teenagers. How many of you are learning a foreign language? Teenagers won that one. How many of you wrote poetry in the last month? Oh yeah, the teenagers won that one. How many of you have memorized the lyrics of 100 songs? Teenagers overwhelmingly win that. Adults did pretty good for that. So like I could go on all day asking questions about language acquisition and slang and language generation and nicknames. So anything about language, and the teenagers would win because your minds are still plastic in the good sense of movies, slidey, back and forthy, changey, and that kind of plastic. And you're still acquiring language. You're still generating new stuff, and in a way. That ability, and you're still like enough of a kid to play with words, to play with stuff, and that's another reason why I think writing for teenagers is cool, because you can have a book like Uglies, where new words just keep popping up, and your audience will accept you, and they'll be into that. Whenever I read guides to writing adult fiction. They always spend a lot of time saying, don't do this because it will throw your reader out of the story. Like, don't use any verb of utterance other than said. But teenagers and younger kids can read books where people whisper and shout and yell, and they're not like, holy crap, I'm out of the story. As I said rather rudely to an interviewer once, we have a different way of keeping our readers in the story. We tell good stories. And basically, that plasticity and that ability to keep learning and keep changing is a thing we should all have. And it's definitely, I'm sure most of the adults in this room still have that, otherwise you kind of wouldn't be here on a Tuesday night or whatever, or Monday night. But that characteristic, that what we now call a teenager, that little wedge that got invented like 100 years ago, that's going to keep growing. There's already some sort of moral panic about the fact that 25-year-olds live at their parents' house and still play video games. But that's just going to keep growing. The kinds of things that we associate with teenagerhood, that kind of thinking, that kind of continuing to learn and grow, that will continue to expand and until finally everyone's a teenager except people over 90 and under 10. And I think that's kind of where we're going. And it's a characteristic of all the sort of intelligent species on our planet that they play even after they get old. Like the dumb species only play and then they become really boring when they're older. But like dogs and dolphins and whales and humans and monkeys all keep playing their entire life. They do childish things their entire life. And this scientists call this neoteny, and it's a really cool thing. And I think that's just part of, we created this extra space where you don't have to be like in the coal mines 80 hours a week, and you're not an infant. And that space is continuing to grow because machines and whatever. Yes. See, now it's easy to ask questions, but you didn't win anything, yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Now that YA has really grown into its own kind of genre, do you think that now there's a standard recipe or set of rules for writing it? And if there is, do you think there should be, or that it's changing?
I don't think YA has gotten really calcified into, if you read the stuff in the 50s, it's much more formulaic than anything today. And the fact that, we thought it would be vampire books forever, and we thought it would be dystopians forever, and I'm sure that 3 years from now, the New York Times will, they will announce that finally we've broken out of this rut, and we're going to have this thing called Well Lit, which is about teenagers who don't have cancer. It's healthy teenagers. It's going to be awesome. It's the new thing. And it's boring comas. But what is big and what is interesting keeps changing, and in completely unpredictable ways and in completely weird ways. And yes, it is true there are writers and publishing companies that will dump a big truckload of whatever people want to read, but that's only because teenagers are really good at reading a lot of stuff in the same genre. Like anybody, you get a new thing, you're like, this is the best idea ever, I want 60 more of that. But that's not some sort of evil calcification of publishing, that's just capitalism doing what capitalism does, which is give you what you want. Yes?
Sorry, can I tack on a little
Yeah,
something?
sure.
Do you think that years from now, when people finally recognize like YA as classic literature, or maybe not sure, but when people are looking back on this period, will they recognize certain elements of this?
Oh yeah.
story?
Well, I mean, and that has to do with the what teenagers are. There's this new form of life that has where you're always, having kind of new experiences, like first kiss, first beer, first meaningful lie, first betrayal, first time that you get betrayed by a friend. Those kinds of things are really super dramatic and interesting, and that is one of the characteristics of YA, is that it dramatizes those already hyper-dramatic things at a hyper-dramatic point of life, and that's where we get our story energy from, which is why we don't have to worry about verbs of utterance. Yes?
How did you come up with the slang that's in Peeps and the Ugly series?
So how did I come up with the slang and uglies? So the slang in uglies is mostly stolen from Australia. Australians do not like to say long words. Like musician is muso, documentary is doco. You can open your Chrissy Prezzies after brekkie. And there's that, and that sort of IE ending is very common in Australia. So, and littlies is a word you actually do hear there, and I've heard crumblies there, and in Britain in some places. And I had littly and crumblies, so I wanted this like intermediate stage of life where you're not quite little and you haven't had the operation yet, that dangerous part of life, to have a name. So the uglies was the obvious thing. It's pretty, it's operation. I read the book. And so that's where I got all that from. So stealing is where I get my slang from. In Last Days, there's Fossum. I actually stole that from a kid, from someone who sent me a fan mail and was just saying Fossum, and I was like, can I just use Fossum? Because it's just so weird. So that's where I get my slang, and in a lot of the slang in Leviathan is historical. I just went and picked the funniest historical slang and stole it. Yes. Now that I've disparaged adults, I have to laugh on it.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask kind of an old school question.
Okay.
Being one who was, when I was a teenager, read Brave New World and some of the other, in 1984, the classic dystopian novels. It seems to me there's a difference between that kind of dystopia and a lot of the current YA dystopia. And there's a part of me that's a little bit critical, that's my part. But that there's kind of sort of, the old dystopia has social criticism element to it. And the new YA dystopia is kind of like it's a given. It's like, it's the setting, and there's...
Are you saying that Uglies doesn't have a social criticism? I mean, I think, because that's pretty funny. Yeah, but no. But I think, I think that a lot of YA dystopias, they are about about the passage into some kind of adulthood. Like, it's about that, and they are set down in the character. And the thing about YA is that it's highly interested in point of view and in close point of view, and it's basically machines are books for becoming other people is the way YA views novels, because what you're doing is you're dropping entirely into someone's head, and therefore your concerns tend to be very limited to that person, and limited to that kind of glorious egocentrism of the teenager, which is like you see that world.